I want to start out with Jerry, because you founded Yahoo at a very different time. This is when the internet was a promise for global collaboration. China had not yet put up the Great Firewall, and we didn't yet have these discussions of decoupling. So from your position, where is this decoupling going, and what are the implications for global innovation?
Well, as an entrepreneur and technologist, I am very focused on innovation, and I think the core of innovation is being severely challenged by the current trends. And I think a lot has been said, both yesterday and today, about the consequences of decoupling, and I think Sam said it really well. But I think there is also this idea of unintended consequences that happen when two sides are backing away from the collaborative nature that we've had over the last 2 and almost 3 decades. And those are the reactions of both protecting each other's interests in the US and China respectively, but also limiting, as a result, the exchange of information, exchange of data, and the exchange of collaboration. And quite frankly, I think the level of trust has all but gone away. And it is very difficult to have an environment where the first motive and the first thought is suspicion rather than trust. And I think that's the environment we now live in. And I have no doubt that the United States will continue to innovate on its own, and of course China will innovate on its own. But as so many of the issues that we've talked about in the last couple of days do require collaboration, the hope I have is that we do find off-ramps or windows or small yards with tall walls. Whatever the metaphor is, we need to reestablish some level of trust between initiatives that could really promote and benefit, I think, the people of the two countries. And to me, you know, I think Mr. Paulson said it great yesterday. The trade-off between the economy and the trade-off between sort of the geopolitical issues, we are going to reach a sort of a turning point where we are going to do more harm than good by pursuing this protectionism and paranoia. And that's the point when we need to revert and go back to where we can find common ground. And I hope that's the beginning of that conversation at this forum.
Gary, we just heard Jerry talk about these barriers to the flow of talent. We're seeing barriers to the flow of capital. So when it comes to solving these critical societal challenges we've been talking about over the course of the few days, whether it's healthcare or climate change, what does that mean? Are we headed for this innovation winter?
Yeah, so I think if you look at the time that we're living in today, we're really in the middle of the biggest inflection of our lifetime. Technology is going to transform every industry. You can hear it in the New Economy Forum, the different sessions: agriculture, transportation, healthcare, retail, education. Everything is being transformed. And a lot of people talk about the opportunity to create $10 trillion in economic value over the next decade. So tremendous economic opportunity. Also improving productivity in a time where China and other regions have aging populations. So tremendous technology transformation. At the heart of all of that is data and the data economy. And one thing that a lot of people don't understand, that data is growing at an extremely fast pace. 2018 was the first year that machines generated more data than people. And if you look at what the current compute architectures that are there, the current computing technologies, they're not very power efficient. So with the growth in data over the next 5 years, between now and 2025, we'll need to generate another 10% of the world's power, add 10% power generation, just to fuel all of this data. So that's a big challenge. And the path forward, we need to improve the power efficiency 1,000 times. And at the same time, many people talk about Moore's Law being dead or Moore's Law slowing down. So you have to innovate. You have to innovate with new architectures, new structures, new materials, new ways to shrink, new ways to connect chips together, because the current compute architectures will not enable the future. So there's never been a more important time for borderless innovation and collaboration. And I agree with Jerry 100%. Really, at the foundation of any great relationship is trust. And so they're taking actions from a geopolitical standpoint that builds trust is absolutely essential. If not, we're not going to grow towards the $10 trillion as fast, and we're not going to enable a sustainable future.
Yuanqing, Lenovo grew into the world's largest PC maker at a very different time in US-China relations. It grew in the US through some acquisitions, including IBM's PC business. So given the scrutiny we're seeing of Chinese people, of Chinese companies abroad, do you think it would be possible to create another Lenovo today?
The answer is definitely yes. But yeah, probably I should switch to Chinese. Sorry.
Your English is very good.
Yeah. So, 联想的话呢，实际上是
Lenovo
中国改革开放
developed in tandem with China's adoption of the reform and opening up policy. We are a private company. China's reform and opening up has undergone 3 stages. To sum it up, actually, we have been introducing new things in, going global, and introducing new things in again. A few days ago, we had the China Expo. This is the second time we're introducing new things in. We're introducing advanced products and services from abroad. On the one hand, we meet Chinese people's increasing aspiration for a better life by doing so, and at the same time, we can better improve the trade balance. And this time, by introducing new things, actually about 3 to 4 decades ago, this would be impossible because Chinese people was very poor. We couldn't afford such advanced things. Back then, when we were introducing new things in, we were introducing foreign companies to engage in production and manufacturing in China, utilizing cheap labor in China. And that made China the world factory. And at the same time, there's a negative effect or side effect or another impact. That is, it brought market economy to China, and the market reform, the market has a basis with that, and the competition rules have been introduced, and that also has facilitated the development of private companies like Lenovo. So in the Chinese market, we make full use of the market situation to develop ourselves, and at the same time, we continue to accumulate capital and our competitive edge. And we've been learning advanced Western managerial expertise. And after that, we've been going global. We've been selling products abroad, and we've been promoting our brands abroad. So what I want to say that Lenovo has been successful in globalization and internationalization because we adopted market rules to engage in competition. We know about competition and we're good at it. And secondly, amid the process of globalization, we purchased the IBM PC business to become a global company, and we've been working hard to ensure that in some major markets, we could become a global company and a local company. So we've introduced a few principles. For instance, globalization. We have a 3S principle. Sale. Selling to markets around the world, and sourcing, fully utilizing global resources, not just raw materials, which are sourced globally, but also R&D resources and manufacturing bases. These are spread across the world for us. And spectrum. This means that we make full use of global human resources. Our management is quite diverse. Our board of directors is also diverse. For excellent people like Jerry, who knows about China and U.S. cultures, and Jerry is actually a member of the board of directors of Lenovo. And we also focus a lot on localization, and we have a 3C principle. Capability. This means that in every local market, we hope to use local talent because they know about the local market the most. And secondly, compliance. In each local market, we hope to respect local laws and abide by local laws strictly. And lastly, citizenship. We hope to pay back to the local communities. we pay taxes and respect local culture. And only in this way can we ensure that we have successful business. And I'm sure that more Chinese companies can learn from our experience.
Offered an optimistic view of how a Chinese company can go global, but I want to get into some of the divergent culture and ethics that we're really seeing starting to clash between the US and China. We all know the NBA, companies like Activision Blizzard are under the spotlight in China amid growing nationalism. You also have expanding censorship and fears around how the Chinese government is collecting data using AI. Now, many years ago, Yahoo came under great scrutiny for giving data to the Chinese government that was then used for the arrest of dissidents. With everything that has transpired now, how do you reflect on that situation? And is there a sort of code of ethics that US foreign companies can follow when doing business in China?
Well, I think, as we discussed, the forces that are pulling the two countries apart are both technological, ideological, and in many ways, maybe the economics is almost put on a bit of a back seat. And I think as sort of the national security concerns and ideological concerns take the front seat, really on both sides, it puts businesses at a very precarious position, whether you're consumer businesses like the gaming or the sports, or even people delivering services, and goods. And so I think the challenge with doing businesses across countries that have different value systems, that's been around, for a long time, but I think it's really starting to be more apparent in areas where there are much more differences of opinions, and I think that's what's happened here in China. And the companies that choose to operate in China from other places around the world, foreign companies, have to face the fact that you have to comply, like Yuanqing said. Lenovo complies in everywhere they operate, and being legal in everywhere you operate is a core premise. People can't put their employees in danger and things like that. So I feel like it's a very dynamic situation. Number one, number two. When governments aren't agreeing, and there's no explicit way for a company to navigate these things, the companies have to recognize that's a risk. And I think, and there's no easy answer, because I think what's right in one country may not be right in another country. And this is not just US and China. This is true in every other country that multinationals operate.
Do you think the US government should be offering some more support or guidelines for companies?
Well, I think the U.S. The U.S. is the government itself obviously does do some things to offer companies some guidance, and they're largely on a legal and a trade basis, but obviously they don't really offer guidance around things around ethics and certain business practices. So I think companies have to be careful, because I think while there is an obvious way of creating value for your shareholders, there's also other constituents you have to take into account of. And I think in many ways, the fact that consumer internet companies are not here in China from the West is that they do have to deal with some of those questions that has not been
Sam,
very easy to answer. Yeah.
Right. I want to briefly go to you, because it's obviously a very difficult moral dilemma that foreign companies, US companies face when working in China. Is there something you think that on the regulatory side that could be done from the US side to sort of help these sort of cross-border collaborations?
I think that these questions are bigger and more complex than individual companies can handle on their own. Now, is this a question for regulation? Is this a question for standards or guidelines? There needs to be, I think, a code of conduct developed to deal with these difficult issues. US companies should be able to push back when it comes to law enforcement access to data requests. They should not have to provide surveillance technology, a whole host of things. I think what we need is a strategy for tech engagement in China, and it's time to have that kind of conversation.
Gary, you are in the semiconductor industry, the
Yes.
world's largest supplier of semiconductor equipment. Now, when you look at Chinese efforts to achieve self-reliance. That's really been accelerated by the coercive actions from the US government. But some say that even China's best semi companies are still years behind their US competitors. So in your view, how far behind are the Chinese in building their homegrown semiconductor industry?
Yeah, like I said, if you look at the data economy going forward, technology transforming every industry, the current compute architectures are not made for those types of applications. And that's why they consume so much power. So the current technology will not enable the future. We need innovation, 1,000 times improvement in power efficiency. So just taking what we have right now and scaling it up is not going to enable the future. We have to drive innovation. And as I said, new structures, new architectures, new ways to connect chips, new materials, all of those things, that is the future. That's what will enable the future. So I think that if you look at the overall geopolitical situation, Hank Paulson talked yesterday about the relationship between national security and economic growth and how tightly connected those are. And really, I believe that in any relationship, you have to have a foundation of trust. And so building trust right now is very, 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 very important. If you look at the scenarios, you could go down a path of fear where people try to protect what's there today. But what's there today is not going to enable the future. That is not the technologies of the future. So building trust around structural reforms, not overreaching on national security, those are the areas that are just absolutely crucial for us to drive economic growth.
But do you see the US and China building their own separate ecosystems when it comes to the semiconductor industry, own supply chains, own production?
I think no company can build this ecosystem, build the infrastructure for the data economy going forward in the future. I don't see that happening in 5 years. I don't see that happening in 10 years. I think that really this borderless innovation, the companies and the countries that will grow the fastest are the ones that collaborate the best. Those are the companies that are going to win the future. I deeply believe that.
And I think everybody in the audience may have read the headlines from Bloomberg News that the US government has started approving and denying some licenses to sell to Huawei. Yeah. So where does Applied Materials sit there?
We don't really have any direct business with Huawei. Every single semiconductor chip and display in the world is made with our products. We've been in China for 35 years, and really no impact on our engagements here in China.
Yuanqing, I want to get back to you. We've been talking a lot about this distrust, but Lenovo has actually escaped a lot of the scrutiny that's hit companies like Huawei and ByteDance. How has Lenovo achieved that? And are you concerned that that could change?
Yeah,所以这个像我刚才所讲的
Yes, as I mentioned before, I actually agree with the points mentioned by the other panelists in terms of the importance of trust and also cooperation. They both are very important. Actually, the idea about decoupling in terms of technology or supply chain is not realistic. We can't imagine that technologies are serving the whole mankind. This is not just a business. This is in line with the economic rules, but also this is something ethical, moral. If we do not have uniform standards instead of having separate standards in different countries, first of all, that will put consumers with discomfort. For example, 2G, 3G in that era, around the world, there were so many standards, CDMA, WCDMA, TD-SCDMA, etc. First of all, that brought a lot of inconvenience, problems to consumers. Every other country you go, you have to change a cell phone. Obviously, that's not good for scale development of the industry. If we need scale for industry, we need technologies to be widely popularized and adopted. Because bigger scale, if we have bigger scale, we can reduce cost. With a lower cost, we can better enabling further popularization of the technologies. So in 4G era, we had uniform standards. Not only consumers enjoyed benefits, convenience, but also we had faster adoption rate of smartphones. In the past several decades, if you pay attention, IT technologies were adopted way faster than any previous technologies, from the invention to penetration or saturation. It took only 10 years for smartphones to be adopted everywhere. That's because of consistent standards and technologies. Another thing is important as well, WTO. That's the role of WTO. Within WTO, there is ITA. Any signatory countries of this ITA within several years should reduce tariff to 0. That dramatically reduced the cost for technologies to be widely adopted. So not only, again, this brings benefits to consumers, but also to enterprises, and also, more importantly, to more adoption of technology by the society, because technology companies, if they have more money, they can invest more in technologies. In recent several years, you can see dramatic progress of technologies. We hope that this progress can be continued instead of being disrupted while returning to the past. Now we are in the 5G era. Let's do not go back to 2G or 3G era, when people did not agree with each other, when people had our own separate standards. So from enterprises' perspective, that's our vision.
Jerry, as we enter the era of 5G, as Yang Yuanqing was just talking about, there is a fear that as China builds more digital infrastructure around the world, it could be creating cyberspace in its own image into a more authoritarian one. Do you share those fears?
I don't know. I mean, I think the next panel probably could talk about this much better than we can. But I feel like, you know, the way in which infrastructure and services that are layered on top will always have, you know, the culture and the values and the imprints of the people they're trying to, consumers they're trying to serve. And quite frankly, I feel if a consumer doesn't trust their service or they don't trust their infrastructure, they're just not going to use it. And I think Yuanqing said it well. I think we've all been advocating for a point of technology innovation and the ability to drive down lower costs is at a great benefit to consumer. And I think in this tech war, as Gary said, look, we're forgetting the benefit that tech has brought really the world in the last 20 years. And to have a very powerful computer in the palm of your hands, to have tremendous communication capability, to have e-commerce and the ease of services that we've never had before. We're in danger of going back to the dark ages if we do not standardize, if we do fracture into little pockets of markets that really don't sustain themselves versus a global one. So I look at it more as an opportunity that we shouldn't miss, and the prosperity and the growth that comes with it, rather than, yes, there are problems, but to me, these are, you know, to use Sam's word, I mean, we need to have a much more nuanced discussion about tech engagement rather than this blunt force sort of tools that are being used right now.
The clock is running down, but I want to squeeze in 2 questions, so let's make these quick answers. First, Yang Yuanqing, we are at an impasse because given the facts stated in China's national security law, Chinese companies have to help the government in intelligence work. Is there any way for Chinese companies to tell the world 100% they are fail-safe, they are not going to be collaborating? Is there any way to prove that? That there isn't this collaboration between Chinese companies and the government, if it's written in the law in a certain regard? How do you prove to the world that products are 100% safe?
这个还是我刚才讲的，我们在任何市场上面
In any markets,
做经营，我们都
when
要
we have a presence, we need to
尊重本地的这个
follow
法律
local laws
符
and
合
regulations.
这
We need to
个
be
法律来
confined
做事，在
with
中
local
国是这样，
laws,
在美国也
and
是
that's
这样。
the case in China
All right,
and in
Gary,
America.
sorry, you have the hard job of doing it very quickly, but what can we do to continue to collaborate while protecting national security?
Yeah, I really think that, again, this really focus on trust, now is a really crucial time. We have to make progress on structural reforms to build trust. We have to not overreach on national security. Right now, the relationship can go in different directions, either more positive or more negative. But I just really, personally, it's just so important that we make progress now. Waiting is very, very risky. We're going to go in the wrong direction. My wife is from China. We have 10-year-old twins, a little boy and a little girl. You know, I think our role as leaders is to leave the world in a better place. I want to create a better future for my Chinese American children, all the people in China, United States, and across the world.
Well, thank you so much to the panelists. I think every single one of us sitting here are the product of US-China cross-border collaboration, flow of ideas and people. So hopefully it will stay that way into the future. Thank you.